Is there questions in our universe? It's not that God doesn't want to answer. It's because there is no answer to this question. Are there things like that?
There are things like that, and the number one question like that is the question of the origin of evil itself. Why would anyone ever rebel against a good and loving God? And that is referred to in theology as the mystery of iniquity. Because to do something evil, to introduce evil, is actually irrational. It is anti-love. One way of defining evil is that which is against love. And why would anybody do that? Particularly the angel who fell and became Satan. Why would anybody fall from perfection and do that? And we can talk about how it happened, turning inward, becoming selfish. But why someone would make that decision, to try to answer that would end up excusing it, when in fact there is no rational reason for that kind of decision. And that kind of question cannot be answered because it lies in the individual who makes that decision freely. But God's justice and his character and his righteousness, that he has done everything that could be done, every step of the way for the best good of all concerned, that can not only be answered, but it can be demonstrated. It was demonstrated first at the cross, supremely at the cross, and it will be demonstrated in the next life when we're able to see, when God shows us the end from the beginning, and we can see everything he has done, why he has done it, and that he always and only had everyone's best interest in mind.
This conversation begs more questions.
Yes.
The Bible mentions a great war in heaven. My question to you is why would someone want to go to a place where there was a great war? Couldn't war happen in heaven again?
Yeah, it's interesting you frame that question that way, because I might think, I can imagine that I might think, if I was in heaven, why would they let any of us in when we've already shown our true colors? But I think, to the point of your question, that's one of the reasons why God is dealing with the problem of evil the way that he is. Through, not by force, not by power. If that was the case, the conflict would be over immediately. But he's doing it through a demonstration of his righteousness and a demonstration of his love. And Paul talks about this very clearly in Romans 3 and Romans 5. And the way God does this supremely through the cross and beyond, showing that God truly is love and God truly is good, actually defeats all of the allegations against God's character, the questions that were referred to earlier that were raised about his justice. All of these are answered in a way that will eventually satisfy everyone, so that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Christ is Lord, and everyone will recognize that God is righteous and just. And this demonstration through the plan of redemption, supremely through the cross, effectively inoculates the universe so that everyone sees just how evil sin is, and no one will ever want it to rise again, and it never will rise again. And we can be sure of that, at least to the extent that we have faith in the Bible, which I do, because the Bible promises that sin will never rise again. And God can know this with certainty because he knows the end from the beginning. So from a human vantage point, it looks like, oh, maybe this could be a repeating cycle. But God promises us in his infinite wisdom that it will not rise again, and he has done everything that is necessary to effectively inoculate the universe from this ever taking place again, so that this controversy will be ended once and for all, not through force, but ultimately through love and righteousness.
What you're presenting is really fascinating, because it seems like the dilemma of God is, how do you secure the universe from another rebellion, another planet Earth, another insurrection from happening without violating the choices of his creatures? And what you're describing right here is God's primary objective is to secure the universe and preserve freedom of choice in that very process. And he's able to accomplish that through the means of the cross. And any other alternative path that we would sometimes prefer God to utilize, like immediately end, would just recreate the same kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Same kind of dynamics that would bring about rebellion again.
Yeah, I think that's right. I often invite my students, when they say, why did God do this or why doesn't God do that? I often invite them to ask, well, what other alternatives are available to God to accomplish that purpose? And if we think about it for a moment, we realize we don't know. Because we don't know all of the factors that God is dealing with. We don't know all the parameters involved. We only see a very small part of the picture. But I think we can look to the God of the cross and answer with conviction that if there had been any other way, that God who's willing to die for us, he would have chosen it. And just recognize we can trust him, and there's things beyond what we know, but we can trust his infinite wisdom and his infinite love.
Fantastic. Chaplain, you got the last thought. Anything you add to that?
I think for me, if that was asked of me, basically, for the believer, everything is based upon our faith. Not rationale, not reason. You're asking a very rational question. And so all of my arguments must rest on my faith. And my faith says that God says it will not rise a second time. That's number one. Secondly, one of my giants in strategic leadership is Peter Drucker. And he says only 3 things happens naturally in organizations, and the universe is an organization: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership. Friction will happen by itself. We will do that as a human race. Confusion by itself. Underperformance by itself. Leadership. God led from the beginning. He's the greatest strategic mind in the universe. And so the moment that the sin was committed in the heart of Lucifer, the crop was set and the plan of salvation was put in motion. And so he had to allow it to run the course. So lastly, I would offer you, direction is more important than speed. And so essentially, God knew that this sin problem, this hamartia thing, is going to take a minute. So he was not interested in the speed of it, but he was very interested, God was very interested in the direction of it, i.e. that it will move to a point where it will not die the second time, to the point where when God, Elohim in the Hebrew, the 3 of them came together and says, how are we going to get after this gulf fix? How are we going to get after reconciling man? And the 3 minds came together. And of course, one says, because I'm just, because I'm true, only the law is equal to the character and the justice of God himself. And so to reconcile God, to reconcile us back to God, God himself had to give up God.
Any other questions? Right over there.
Do you believe that we are alone in the universe? And if so, or if not, what do you think that says about God wanting to make life abundant, or about the uniqueness of the human consciousness?
I'm going to let him take that.
So I do not think we are alone. The Bible doesn't talk much about this issue, but it does make very clear that beyond our world there is not just God, but there are also the angels, and also fallen angels, and that there is more going on than meets the eye, both in our world and beyond our world. Additionally, there's some scenes throughout Scripture that some scholars refer to as heavenly council scenes. Like in the book of Job, you have this scene where Satan comes to where God is, and the sons of God are there to present themselves. And so, we don't really know exactly who those sons of God are, but some people think that they're representatives of other worlds in this kind of like heavenly courtroom scene. So the information we have is partial, which is often the case when it comes to big questions and things of God. But what we have suggests that there is life out there, more than just God, other creatures. And I think it does point to the fact that God is love, that there's a universe beyond our imagining, that it also seems likely, I don't want to speculate, I'm not God, there are many things I don't know, but it seems likely that a God of love would create much more than what we see within the limits of our solar system or the furthest that our telescopes can reach.
What does that tell us even more about the plan of redemption? Does the fact that we live in a bigger universe in some way diminish the plan of redemption, or does it enhance the bigger picture and the moves that are made within the plan of redemption?
Yeah, I think it actually enhances it. So Paul writes about this, and he describes what he has gone through and the other apostles have gone through, and he says that we are like a spectacle or a theater to men and to angels, suggesting that there is an entire universe that is looking on more than just what is happening on this earth. And the plan of redemption, Paul also describes in cosmic terms, that all of creation groans. And I think that extends to the entirety of the universe that is affected by the questions that are raised on our planet with sin and evil that God is working to answer through the plan of redemption. And so what Christ does to save us is not just to save me individually, although it is, not just to save this world, although it is, but is to actually redeem the cosmos and to inoculate the universe such that evil will never rise again.
Any other questions? Right over there.